All right, back for part two of how to anti-Scrooge your holiday. Just a quick thought I wanted to share on second character from Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol, and that's the character of Fred. Fred is Scrooge's nephew. So Fred is going to be able to show us some really good ways of what does it look like to hold a loving posture towards somebody, but also have some healthy boundaries for someone who is difficult in your life. And that could be a spectrum of difficulty from full-on Scrooge to a lot of other scenarios. But I think there's something that is both loving and limited in a really healthy way about how Fred shows up. So back to the story. Beginning of the story, establishing how Scroogey Scrooge is and selfish and closed off and lonely and uncharitable. His nephew Fred shows up and invites Scrooge to Fred's Christmas party. And we quickly get a little bit of context that it sounds like Fred does this every year, and Scrooge has a pattern of declining every year, but he still comes to ask him because Fred is kind of says it's the spirit of Christmas to be charitable at this time and to invite people to enjoy. And in some ways, I know you don't have anybody. Like Scrooge has lost his sister, which is Fred's mother, and so there's this family strain there. So what I love about that is kind of from part one, there's this generosity and love in Fred to be able to invite even his curmudgeon-y uncle to come to Christmas dinner. That's no small thing for Fred to ask. I'm going to infer a little bit because it's not directly, maybe Fred was there all the time, but the way that conversation plays out in this story feels like he's doing it once a year. So Fred has this limitation on himself. He's realized, what capacity do I have to show love and charity towards my uncle and also choose to live my life in as much fullness and goodness as it can. In other words, he's not camping out pining for what he doesn't have with his uncle, and yet he also has some space for inviting his uncle into that goodness, representing this heart of love. I think of actually the parable that Jesus tells where Jesus says, the servants went out to say, hey, the wedding's going, and none of the guests were there. And he says, well, go out and ask some more people. And those people couldn't come. And he's like, go out into the streets and ask anybody and everybody, whoever wants to come. I'm not going to waste my time on people who can't come. In other words, there is a heart of God that says, I'm throwing a party and everyone's invited. But if the people who are saying, we don't want to go, God will continue to extend invitation to say, everyone's welcome. So I love that there's this space for Fred to have as much charity as he has towards his Uncle Scrooge. So I think a good learning for us is to take an inventory of how much space do I have? If I'm in a place of still healing from a wounded relationship, I might not have as much space. That's okay. And if I do have some space, have I wisely thought through how much time, capacity, and energy do I actually have to offer to that person and offering them into what I've got going on, which is actually the second piece, which is when we fast forward and Scrooge invisibly is with the ghost of Christmas Present and he gets a peek in on his nephew Fred's party. They are having a great time. They're living life to the fullest. They're playing party games. They're having a great time. And we don't cut to this version of Fred that's, oh, my uncle wouldn't come and this is bummed out and he can't come. Perhaps, again, if we're going to read into this character, that there was perhaps a period of grieving of, oh man, I'm bummed, sad that my uncle can't come. And yet he didn't let that define him. So he has some boundaries of, I love you, and yet my worth and value and my ability to celebrate is not completely tied to the health of our relationship. There's some healthy boundaries there. So despite having lost his mother, having no functional relationship with his uncle, Fred has chosen to allow himself to live and to live a good life. He's committed to this posture of love and invitation towards his uncle. He drinks to his health at the party, and he continues to enjoy his community. I think this can be a really good reminder amidst a lot of difficulty is it's okay to have some chosen limited interactions with people in your life that might be difficult in the relationship. It's also really good to want to embody the spirit of God's love to say, I want to invite you to the party. So it's not snubbing, and it's also not having to suffer because of someone else's decision of where they're at. And again, I know family relationships are tricky. Hopefully this can have some guiding postures and principles for you if you find yourself navigating difficult relationships this holiday season. But may you have a great Christmas, and may you have great generosity, kindness, and celebration with